Hey, it's Em. Today we are going to talk about Husband Material, the sequel to Boyfriend Material. Yes, I am still trying to read Queen of the Damned. It's slow going. That one's a hard one, and we'll get to that. But in the meantime, I did finish this, and it's time to talk about it. Okay, so if you watch my channel regularly or have watched the last few videos, well, if you watched my best of 2022, I'm sure Boyfriend Material got mentioned because it was one of my favorite books last year. I gave it like a 4.9 stars. There was some stuff at the end that I just felt was unnecessary. But it was very nearly a perfect read for me. I really enjoyed it. It was lighthearted. It was funny. And Husband Material is the sequel to that. Now, as I've often said, when you start at a high level, it's hard to sustain that. So it's probably no surprise that for me, Husband Material was not as good. I gave it like a 3.75, 3.8. So a star less than its predecessor. And we'll talk about why. But first, all of the warnings apply. There are going to be spoilers, so if you haven't read the book or you don't want to know what happens in the book, don't watch this video because we're going to talk about a lot of the major plot points. This book could just as easily be called like 3.5 weddings and a funeral because that's what it covers. Lucien and Oliver have been together for 2 years now, so 2 years have passed since the events of the first book. They're still, happily a couple, and Lucien spends most of his time at Oliver's, but he does still have his own place. At the beginning of the book, Lucien is being maid of honor for Bridget's wedding to Tom, so there's some wedding stuff going on there. He also then finds out that his ex Miles is getting married and gets invited to that wedding, which sets off some feelings. And he and Oliver go to that wedding, and it's very performatively gay, like with the rainbow lights and the loud metal-y music or something, punk music, I don't know. And the officiant is in drag or something like that, and it's not Oliver's scene, but it is Luke's scene. So there you start to see the clash of feelings about how they portray their homosexuality. And that ends up being a big theme throughout the book. And that's kind of where the story gets bogged down because Luke says offhandedly to Oliver one day, "We should get married," and Oliver says yes. And this starts the ball rolling on a lot of fights over how they each envision their wedding, like the way they celebrate a gay love story, more or less. There's this whole thing about a rainbow balloon arch that goes on and on and on. It just keeps coming up. And I get it. Like, I get the core of what's being, said. It's just, it ends up not being a very lighthearted or fun story. And it ends up being pretty repetitive. They have a lot of the same arguments from a lot of different angles, but it's more or less the same and nothing ever gets decided. They go to Alex's wedding, which is much more traditional. It's in a cathedral. It's much more Oliver's thing. Luke sits there and has these very involved thoughts about the religiosity of it all and I don't know, the stuffiness. And it felt, again, it felt like a lot. There's just a lot of, this book has a lot of social commentary, and that's not to say that that's not valid and useful, but for what was anticipated to be a lighthearted comedy about, two characters we've learned to love from the first book, potentially getting married, and we'll get to that, but it felt like a lot. And then Oliver's father dies, so we get the funeral side of things and the complicated, the complications of grief. But because everything's from Luke's point of view, it doesn't really hit home, maybe. It's almost as if we should have seen some of this from Oliver's POV, just to feel it a little bit more closely, because I think that's a little bit of where this book falls down, in that we're getting Luke's point of view and we're hearing Oliver, obviously, his dialogue and his body language or what have you, but we're not feeling it. And since Luke has a hard time being in touch with his feelings at all, you end up not feeling very much of anything here. Or I didn't. I mean, it didn't work for me. It felt like it started well and it started to get kind of bogged down, and by the end of it I felt like I was trudging through a little bit of mud to get to the end of this book, where honestly I probably should have seen where it was going, the outcome, but it still felt abrupt to me, because they'd been planning this wedding, and I mean, they're arguing about balloon arches and whether to have a DJ or a band or whatever, very, typical things, which is strange. It was strange because, again, I didn't feel that Luke had strong feelings, even though he professed to have certain feelings about, like, he liked Miles's wedding because but it was nostalgic for him in some ways, because he realized he was also not that person anymore, but like there were some things about that he still liked and wanted to incorporate into their wedding, or as a way of showing himself. So it becomes this like dialogue of, is there a happy medium between us? Are we too different? Because like they're happy as a couple, but when it comes to, I guess, planning an event that is supposed to showcase both of them, they're too different for it to mesh well. It was a lot of conversations that never came to any real resolution, is I think part of the problem. And the ultimate resolution was that the night before the wedding, Luke is, sick to his stomach. He tells Bridget, I don't want to marry Oliver. I want to stay with Oliver. I don't want to marry him. And that felt like kind of out of the blue and weird. Yeah, he says something that I just fundamentally disagreed with. He said something about how marriage was, or is it's the expectations of all the weddings and marriages or something that came before you, or something like that. And in my mind, that is just absolutely not true. A marriage, the expectations are only what you and your partner bring to the table. Like, anybody else's expectations don't matter, don't count. It's just, it's what you two agree on. And that's just my point of view. But anyway, so I think there was maybe, for me, a fundamental disagreement between me and this book. So that might be part of why I didn't enjoy it as much. At the end of the day, Oliver comes in a few minutes before they're supposed to actually get married, because Luke has decided he's going to go through with it anyway. Even if he doesn't really want to be married, he's going to do it because he won't leave Oliver at the altar. But Oliver comes in and says, I love you, but I don't want to marry you. This is too much of an institution for, like, heterosexuals or whatever. I just don't feel like this is right for us. And if that means I lose you, I guess I'm okay with that, which I don't know how I would feel about that. I mean, Luke is rightfully angry despite the fact that he doesn't actually want to get married either. He's kind of like, but you're willing to just dump me? Like, it's a complicated set of emotions, and that part I understand. But, yeah, so I felt a little cheated, and I felt like it came a little bit abruptly, this, like, we're not getting married after all. Because it's husband material, and, yeah, there are weddings, but, I guess neither one of them is husband material. I don't know. They tell their friends and loved ones to enjoy the party at this non-wedding, and they run off into the rain together, I guess. And so you kind of feel like, at the end of the book, you're just kind of where you started. Like, has there actually been any character growth? I mean, part of it is if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, if you're happy as a couple, keep on keeping on, do your thing. But like, you put me through a bunch of like very heavy social commentary, a lot of arguments. There's very little lightheartedness involved in any of this. And then I didn't even get like the wedding. Like, you're just like, and then they decided not to get married. The end. And I don't know. It felt like a letdown. It just did. Yeah. And, I get the points of view, and I get that it's valid not to want to get married. Like, I get all that, and I understood all of what was being said. Although, like I said, I never felt like anything was actually resolved. And maybe part of the point is that these are ongoing discussions that people have throughout their lives with their partners and loved ones. But I wasn't sure how that translated into, but we just shouldn't get married. I didn't see the leap in logic there, and I didn't see why, like, I didn't have enough of the breadcrumbs to get from, we're arguing about our wedding, to, we don't want to get married. Like, maybe I should have, but I just didn't, I don't know, it didn't work for me. Something about the way it was done, structured or paced or something, it just didn't work for me overall. I enjoyed parts of it. There's this part where Oliver does this cute, like, pretty woman thing, and I thought that was really darling. I liked when Luke unleashed, like, his anger on the high court judge guy. That was pretty good. But overall, it was a little heavier than I could appreciate from what I was hoping would be a lighthearted romantic comedy, right? So yeah, that's that. And I'm still working on Queen of the Damned. I'm almost done with part 1. I'm in the middle of Jesse getting ready to go to Lestat's concert. And I promised my son I would finish Tower of Nero so we could talk about it, because he's been like trying not to spoil anything for me. So that's also next on my list. And yeah, that's it for now. If you've read this book, if you have feelings about this book, let me know in the comments. And I mean, God help us if they decide to do father material and they inherit Oliver's nephew or something. I don't know. They talked about the baby in this book so much. I'm like, I can't see that as a valid, if they don't even want to get married, I don't know. Like, and I'm not even saying that people who are not married shouldn't have kids together. That's not the issue. I just don't see, character-wise, a shift in which the two of them make good parents. Maybe Oliver, but I can't see Luke being happy as a parent. Just the way he's written, and the fact that there was no character growth per se in this book, really. I think a lot of things would have to change before I could imagine his character going in that direction. He was totally uninterested in the baby in this book, his friend's baby. So I don't know. Man, anyway, that's it for now. I will see you next time, and until then, take care.